The Hawks are undefeated. They're ranked. It's a blackout. We're playing Michigan. It's a night game. Could it get any better? This is Incompetent Sports Talk. Hello, everybody. Welcome to Incompetent Sports Talk, along with Mike Rabon and Jordan Loperena. I'm Alex Solsma, and the Hawkeyes are celebrating their first 5-0 start since 1995 as Iowa defeated Arkansas State 24-21 in Kinnick Stadium. Jordan, I'll start with you. What about the Hawks?
The Hawkeyes, unfortunately, had to just pull one out against Arkansas State, but at the same time, you can't be disappointed with one going in the W column. It wasn't a pretty win. At times it looked like it was going to be, and then it just never quite got up to that level. Ricky Stanzi had about a bipolar opposite of what he had normally been doing. He had an outstanding first half and a poor second half versus his traditional, slow start, strong finish type of game. The running game was pretty disappointing, but I was really impressed with the play of our receivers, Trey Strauss, Marvin McNutt. They all looked outstanding, and despite Ricky's 2 interceptions, with the last one being, a pretty bad decision on his part, and I think he'll be the first to admit it. Besides those 2, I thought he looked pretty sharp throughout the entire day. Our defense, again, also just unbelievable. Got to give it up to Tyler Sash with another interception, and I think he's 8 short of Niall Kinnick now, and he's only a sophomore.
Mike, and 5-0, I mean, nothing too bad about that.
Yeah, you absolutely have to be happy with being 5-0. There's no doubt about it. Ricky Stanzi got off to a great start, 2 quick touchdown passes. That's clearly exactly what we wanted. But again, those 2 interceptions, a little scary. There were some other opportunities that Arkansas State had that if they had capitalized, they could have come out with a win. Again, we had 7 receivers catch passes. So Ricky Stanzi threw the ball over the field. That 7 different receivers will come back later when we talk about the Michigan game. So I've got to be happy overall with the Hawkeyes getting the win. But Stanzi's got to stop making these mistakes that could end up losing us the game. We held Reggie Arnold, one of the Sun Belt's best running backs, to 42 yards on 10 carries. The big problem I had was Willie Lowe getting burned by Brandon Tompkins all day. Tompkins had 72 yards on 8 receptions, and we have Prater back, which is good, but we're going to have to make some adjustments because Michigan's wide receivers are very athletic as well.
Yeah, I don't really think the defense played too bad at all, even though I guess this was the game that we gave up the most points to any opponent all year. It just seems like that Arkansas State really made a lot of really good plays. It seems like we were really close to getting the tackle several times or really close to making the play, and it just didn't happen. But I think really we go against Michigan, I think we're going to have a pretty successful outing. And you know what, I'm not going to complain or harp on this too much because we're 5-0. I hardly remember the last time we were 5-0. It was 1995. It was 15 years ago. It was back in the Hayden Fry era. So congratulations to Kirk Ferentz and the Hawks for being 5-0. But yet, 5-0, that doesn't mean you got a Big Ten championship. It really doesn't mean a whole lot yet. So we got to build on that. But I'm so happy to be 5-0 right now. But that happiness will translate hopefully to another victory this Saturday. But we'll talk more about that later. Now, we don't always like to harp on things here at Incompetent Sports Talk, but there's some referees down in the SEC that made me a little disappointed this weekend. But really, it all goes back to the issue, what is excessive celebration? Should there be an excessive celebration penalty, or should it be something rewritten in the rule books totally? Because if you saw the LSU-Georgia game this Saturday, you know that there are some really garbage excessive celebration penalties called. Both teams got one called on them. First of all, it all started with Georgia. I don't remember who it was who made the touchdown.
A.J. Green.
A.J. Green made the touchdown, runs in the end zone. He's celebrating with his team, not taunting the other team at all, and then he gets an excessive celebration pulled on him. BS. That's garbage. This also reminds me of last year, too. Jake Locker. We all love Jake Locker here on Incompetent Sports Talk, but last year playing BYU, ranked BYU in Seattle, Jake Locker got a really bad excessive celebration penalty called on him. It was like the exact same situation. So this really brings up the ultimate question. What was the rule written for? Well, I did a little digging. Vince Dooley, we all know Vince Dooley, the great coach at Georgia, Keith Jackson's broadcast partner in the ABC booth for a long time, and then director of the NCAA Rules Committee in the 90s. In 1995, they amended this rule. And Dooley has been on record saying that this was encouraging team celebration. It encourages team celebration. Now, it was supposed to prevent individual celebration, but he encouraged teams to celebrate together instead of individuals going off and doing their own thing. So really, if you look at what Vince Dooley's original intent of the rule is, that was it. And now we've gotten to this thing where if they show any emotion, they get a penalty. So Mike, I apologize for that rant, but what is your thought on this? Should they just totally redo the rule?
Well, I just want to say this. I think for the most part, officials are pretty good at keeping that rule in its original form. I mean, I went to the East Carolina-North Carolina football game this year, and right away, when the first two teams scored, they called the excessive celebration penalty right away, even before, almost before there was any celebration. So sometimes I think officials like to do it at the beginning of games to set a tone and say, hey, don't get too rowdy, don't taunt. But at the end of a game like that, it set up LSU. There were other circumstances that played into it. It set up LSU at Georgia's 37-yard line, and of course, Charles Scott made the big run to get the touchdown. So I don't think the rule should be amended, but officials have to be consistent. I mean, obviously, when you look at what happened with Georgia and Florida 2 years ago, where the Georgia players, the whole team ran off the sideline into the end zone, that's a clear penalty. But when the Georgia and LSU players this year were playing and they run in and then celebrate as a team, just the players on the field, no penalty, not necessary. So I think it's more of the officials being consistent and using the rule within its boundaries rather than otherwise.
And I think, too, there needs to be a line drawn between excessive celebration and taunting. I'm all for a penalty for taunting because in any of these circumstances that we just previously mentioned, none of them were taunting. They're players going with their team and celebrating. So, Jordan, where do you draw that line?
I'll agree with you and mention the taunting thing. I know one of the first lessons, actually, my dad ever kind of taught me about celebrating was when David Boston and Charles Woodson, I believe it was 97, had to go against each other, the Ohio State-Michigan game. David Boston caught a touchdown for Ohio State, had a few steps on Woodson, turned around, backpedaled, waved the ball in Woodson's face on his way into the end zone. John Cooper went absolutely insane on Boston, and it kind of turned the tide of the game. Even though Ohio State had gotten the touchdown, you kind of see it work against them. This weekend, Arkansas State, that was an absolute taunt. Flip into the end zone. Kellen Lewis did it a couple of years ago. A spike, that's, it is a little excessive. And mainly something that is choreographed, a celebration that takes thought to produce. Flipping the ball up in the air like Jake Locker did, that's a natural reaction, jumped into his, into his teammates. I think that it goes back to these recent problems. Both of the ones they called against LSU were garbage. In fact, the one on Charles Scott, almost looked like they threw a flag on him for pointing up to God, which is, he was pointing up. No one knows what exactly he was doing, but still, you see players point up after a touchdown. If that's what they're going to get to. And A.J. Green, you go back, I absolutely didn't even understand where the ref thought he could have thrown a penalty. I could not find one exact instance during that celebration. He didn't do the, quiet down towards any specific fans. And in fact, he was at home, so he wasn't going to be doing that. And that'd be something. I know last year, John Parker Wilson, I think it was LSU they played, whose fans had actually gotten his phone number and called him constantly throughout the week, and he scored and he did that. That is taunting because it's a choreographed celebration that took thinking ahead of time. Even a flip into the end zone takes a thought right before it happens. And so that kind of stuff is an absolute
So if it's
excessive.
premeditated, it's taunting.
Premeditated, it's taunting, and if it's disrespectful, it's taunting. If it's celebrating with your teammates in no sort of offensive manner, unless, and then, again, a choreographed team celebration. But besides that, it's getting out of hand. These refs, it's almost like they want more camera time when you see something like happen.
It's continuity, and hopefully that's what we're going to get. It's not something that we really see a lot, but it's maybe once or twice a year. But, in the cases that we were mentioning, it cost the teams possibly the game.